My name is Thomas Harper, and if you'd asked me 6 months ago what I thought of my marriage, I would have said it was solid. Not perfect, what is, but rooted in routine, affection, and those small inside jokes you collect over the years like stones in your pocket. Lily and I had our favorite places, our silent agreements, our little traditions that made even the most ordinary Friday night feel like something special. One of those traditions was meeting at Willow's, a quirky old coffee shop with green velvet seats, faded photos on the walls, and a bell above the door that jingled whenever someone walked in. On Fridays, we always tried to leave work early, grab the corner table by the window, and swap stories over lattes and the bakery's cinnamon rolls. It was, in some strange way, our home away from home, steady, comforting, familiar. That's what made that particular Friday so jarring. I'd been slammed at work and texted Lily that I might be late, but when a meeting was suddenly canceled, I decided to surprise her. The autumn air outside was cool and sharp, the kind of evening that makes you want to reach for someone's hand and never let go. I was in such a good mood as I approached Willow's that I was already picturing Lily's face lighting up when she saw me, maybe even a kiss across the table. Instead, what I saw stopped me cold. Through the slightly fogged glass, I spotted Lily immediately. She always sat facing the window, said she liked watching people walk by. But this time she wasn't alone. Evan, her colleague for marketing, was sitting with her. They were leaning in close, sharing a laugh so genuine that I felt, just for a second, like I was looking at a scene I wasn't meant to witness. Evan's hand rested casually on the table, fingers almost touching Lily's. She didn't notice me right away, and I watched as she smiled, truly smiled, in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. The bell above the door announced me. Lily jolted upright, nearly spilling her coffee, and I saw her slide her phone under her purse in a swift, practiced motion. Evan glanced at me and offered an awkward half-wave. There was a flicker of something between them, guilt, maybe, or just the natural awkwardness of being interrupted. Lily's cheeks flushed, and she plastered on her everything's fine smile. "Oh, Tom, you're early," she said, her voice just a little too bright. "Evan and I were just talking about this new project at work. I thought I'd surprise you with what we've been planning." She patted the seat beside her as if nothing were amiss. Evan nodded, mumbling something about how he should get going, but Lily insisted he stay for a minute since Tom is here and he loves hearing about our campaigns. I sat down, trying to steady myself. The waitress, Grace, who'd known us since our engagement, came over with my usual order, giving me a knowing smile that did nothing to ease the tightness in my chest. Lily launched into a breathless description of a new marketing initiative, pulling Evan into the conversation, though it was clear she was steering every word, keeping things surface level. There was a slight tremor in her hands as she fiddled with her napkin. Evan laughed at all the right moments, but he kept glancing at his watch. I tried to focus on her words, but my mind was whirring, catching on little details. Why had she hidden her phone? Why did they look so comfortable together, so natural, like this was just another of their regular meetings, not an unexpected collision of worlds? I nodded along, smiled where I was supposed to, even cracked a joke or two. But underneath, a sick feeling began to bloom, a mixture of confusion, insecurity, and a sense of being shut out of a conversation in my own language. Eventually, Evan excused himself, saying he had to pick up his girlfriend, and Lily waved him off with a friendly "see you Monday." When he was gone, she turned to me and reached for my hand, her fingers cool, her touch familiar but somehow distant. "Sorry, I know you wanted it to be just us," she said, giving me that smile that used to mean the world. "But this project is huge for my team. I thought you'd like hearing about it. After all, you've always been so supportive." I forced a laugh, willing myself not to sound bitter. "Of course. It just seemed like you two were having a good time. I didn't want to interrupt." She squeezed my hand. "Don't be silly. Evan's a good coworker, he's a bit of a dork, really. Besides, you know you're the only one I want to see outside the office." Her words felt like a script, delivered too quickly, as if she needed to put my doubts to rest before I could even voice them. She launched back into her project pitch, using jargon I barely understood, and when I teased her about talking shop, she rolled her eyes and changed the subject. But the rest of the evening felt off balance, like a song played in the wrong key. We finished our coffees and she insisted on paying the bill, slipping away for a few minutes to the counter. I watched her from across the room, how she glanced at her phone, typed something quickly, then put it away before walking back. On the way home, she talked about weekend plans, about maybe seeing a movie or going for a hike, but there was a new nervous energy in her, a quickness to change topics whenever the conversation got close to anything real. I asked if everything was okay, and she laughed, saying she was just tired from a long week, but I couldn't shake the image of her and Evan, heads close together, sharing secrets. That night, after Lily fell asleep, I lay awake replaying every detail of the evening. I told myself I was being paranoid, that work friendships could look like that Lily had never given me a reason not to trust her. But trust, I realized, isn't just about what you know, it's about what you feel when nobody's looking. And for the first time I felt a chill in the spaces between us, a gap I wasn't sure I could cross. Over the next days I tried to push it aside, to focus on the small, everyday moments that made up our life. But the memory of that evening at Willow's clung to me, sharp and insistent, whispering that something essential had shifted. I told myself it was just stress, just my imagination, but deep down, I knew, sometimes the smallest changes are the most dangerous. Sometimes all it takes is a look through a coffee shop window to see your whole world differently. The more I thought about that evening, the more things seemed to unravel, like an old sweater slowly coming undone, one thread at a time. I told myself that I was just being paranoid, that I had no real reason to doubt Lily. But if I'm being honest, that night marked the beginning of a quiet storm. I couldn't stop replaying the way she'd acted when I walked in, how quickly she'd hidden her phone, how much she had leaned toward Evan, too much, too naturally, for it to just be work talk. And when she brushed it off, so easily, so quickly, it planted a seed of doubt that grew with every passing day. I couldn't explain it, but after that moment I started to notice things I hadn't before, little signs that had always been there but never seemed important. Looking back, it's as though the world had been telling me something all along and I had been too blind to hear it. Lily had always been the one to prioritize work, I knew that, but lately it was as if her job had become her entire world. Late nights had always been a part of her routine, but recently they'd become more frequent. I started noticing that she had new passwords on her phone more than once. She'd changed them after an incident at work, she said, something about privacy or security, but I never questioned it. Why would I? I trusted her. But now, in the quiet of the nights when I lay next to her, I wondered if she'd locked me out, not just of her phone but of her life. Then there were the business trips. Oh, how I hated those trips. They were always so last minute, often just a quick meeting in a neighboring city. She'd come back late on Sunday nights, claiming to be exhausted, but I could see it in her eyes, something different. She'd be a little too distant, a little too wrapped up in her own thoughts. She'd mention her team or a colleague, but never really about what had happened, just enough to gloss over it. She even started talking less about me when we did catch up. She'd talk about work, about what Evan was doing, or about some new initiative in her department, but the us part of her life, our life, was slowly slipping away. I'd ask her about our weekend plans, and she'd act surprised, like she hadn't even thought about them. Maybe we can do something Sunday? I'm not sure yet, she'd say, leaving me with a question that lingered in the air, one I couldn't ask without sounding accusatory. Why aren't we a priority anymore? But it wasn't just the business trips or the new passwords that made me uneasy. It was her appearance too. Lily had always been beautiful, but recently her style had shifted. She'd started wearing brighter, flashier clothes, dresses and skirts in colors I'd never seen her wear before. Her makeup was different, more elaborate, like she was preparing for something or someone, certainly not a quiet evening at home with me. I tried to brush it off, but it felt deliberate, like she was stepping into a role I wasn't meant to be a part of. I remembered the way she used to dress when we first met, simple, understated, always perfect for whatever we had planned. This new version of her was different, more polished, more distant. One day, as I was walking past our home office, I noticed her on the phone, standing by the window, her back to me. She was laughing, but the conversation was quick, too fast, and when she hung up, she looked at me as if caught off guard. I asked who she was talking to. Oh, just a colleague, she said. Nothing to worry about. But the hesitation in her voice, the way her eyes darted away, told me more than her words ever could. It was a lie wrapped up in casual indifference. I didn't press her further, not right away. But in my gut, I knew something was wrong. And there were the small things, the offhand comments, the unexplained silences. When we sat together at dinner, I noticed her constantly checking her phone, always making sure it was face down, as if she didn't want me to see what she was looking at. She was still affectionate in some ways, touching my arm, holding my hand, but it was as if she was doing it out of habit, not out of love. I couldn't help but notice the distance that had grown between us, a quiet chasm that seemed to widen every time I reached out to close it. I remember the day she left for another business trip. It was a Thursday and I had the day off. She was packing quickly, throwing clothes into her suitcase without much care, but I noticed a small, folded piece of paper in her bag, a note from someone. I didn't look at it, not directly, but the corner of it stuck out. I knew it wasn't mine. I had an impulse to read it, to see who it was from, but I stopped myself. Part of me knew I didn't want to know. Another part of me knew it was already too late. When she returned late that Sunday night, her eyes were tired, distant. She didn't tell me much about the trip. I asked her if she'd had a good time, if the meeting went well, and she smiled softly, too softly. It went fine, she said, her voice almost too calm. I'm just happy to be home. But when she kissed me that night, it was perfunctory, as if we were simply going through the motions. I felt her lips against mine, but it didn't feel the way it used to. I wasn't the one she was thinking about. I was a placeholder. In the days that followed, I tried to ignore the little things. I tried to convince myself that I was just overthinking, that Lily had been stressed, that maybe this was just a phase. But my thoughts kept circling back to Evan, to the way she had acted with him, to the way she kept mentioning him. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more going on, something I couldn't see, but could feel deep in my bones. By the time our anniversary rolled around, I had already convinced myself that something wasn't right. But the reality, what I saw that night, brought it all crashing down in a way I couldn't ignore. It happened on our wedding anniversary. The day that should have been a celebration, a day for us to look back on the years we'd shared, the good and the bad, and acknowledge the life we'd built together. But instead, it became the night I learned everything I needed to know. I had planned to keep it simple, a nice dinner, maybe a bottle of wine, just the two of us. We'd been busy with work, with life, but I thought this anniversary would be different. It wasn't much, but it was ours. I knew Lily had a work event to attend that evening, and I assumed it would be the same old corporate thing, cocktail attire, mingling with colleagues, lots of forced small talk. She'd mentioned it several times in passing, but when I asked about it a few days before, she'd assured me it wouldn't run too late. Still, a part of me felt like I should be there with her, showing her how much she meant to me on this special day. So, I made an uncharacteristic decision. I showed up at the venue. I wasn't exactly thrilled about crashing her work event, but as I stood in front of the door, holding the small gift I had picked out for her, it felt right. What was the point of celebrating a life together if you couldn't surprise each other with small gestures? So, I walked in, scanning the room for Lily. The place was loud, filled with colleagues mingling and chatting over drinks, the air thick with laughter and the clink of glasses. But the moment my eyes found her, everything froze. There she was, in the middle of the crowded floor, her body angled toward Evan. She was laughing with him in that way that was far too mate, far too familiar for a professional setting. She wasn't just talking to him. She wasn't even just enjoying a pleasant conversation. No, she was completely absorbed in him. Their faces were too close. They were swaying slightly to the music, their bodies almost touching, their eyes locked in that electric kind of connection that you only see between two people who've shared something far beyond friendship. Lily was smiling, her hand resting on Evan's shoulder, her fingers lightly brushing the fabric of his shirt. Her laughter was carefree, unburdened, and it sent a wave of nausea through me. This wasn't just a harmless conversation, not just friendly banter at a corporate event. This was something more, something I wasn't a part of and something I couldn't ignore. I stood there for a moment, paralyzed. I didn't want to interrupt, didn't want to make a scene. But I couldn't turn away either. I had to confront her, even if I didn't know how. I took a step forward, but she still didn't notice me. I stood just behind them, watching as they danced. Yes, they were dancing, in the middle of the room, surrounded by people, and yet it felt as if the world had disappeared for the two of them. It wasn't until Evan glanced over and saw me that things shifted. He stiffened for a moment, his face flashing with something like guilt. But Lily only smiled, completely unaware of the weight of the situation. She saw me then, and her eyes widened. She froze for a split second before stepping away from Evan, her face shifting into a mask of surprise. Almost too surprised to be real. "Tom," she said. The word rushed, but her tone too practiced, too casual. "I didn't expect you to come. What a nice surprise." Her voice cracked, and I could see the sweat beginning to form along the edges of her hairline. I didn't respond immediately. Couldn't. I didn't know what to say. Instead, I just stood there, feeling the sting of every second that passed, the realization sinking deeper into my chest. "Evan and I were just talking about the new marketing strategies," she continued, her words tumbling out like a defense she didn't quite believe. "We thought it would be good to talk shop tonight, but I didn't mean to make it seem, well, like this." She laughed nervously, but the sound was hollow. I couldn't bring myself to say anything in return. Not yet. My mind was racing, processing the image of them dancing, laughing together, lost in their own world. The image of her fingers on his shoulder, the look on her face. No, it wasn't just a project discussion. It was more. It was betrayal. Evan, ever the professional, quickly excused himself, making a hurried exit as if he had just realized he was too close to something he shouldn't be. But Lily didn't notice him leave. She was too busy fidgeting with her drink, her eyes darting away from mine, avoiding my gaze like it was the one thing she couldn't face. "Tom, I didn't expect you to see all of that," she said, her voice softer now, as if she thought the tension would fade if she lowered her tone. "I told you it's just work stuff. You know how these events go. It's nothing, really." I stared at her, feeling the anger rise in me, hot and bitter. "Nothing?" I said, my voice hoarse. "Is that what it is? Because that didn't look like nothing." Her face flushed with embarrassment, and she took a step toward me. But this time it felt wrong. It wasn't the closeness I was used to. It wasn't the closeness I craved. It felt like a performance, like she was trying to convince herself that I was the one who was overreacting. "Tom, please don't be mad. You know I love you. We've been through so much together, and She stopped, but her words had already lost their meaning. I stood there, paralyzed by the weight of it all. There were no more words left between us. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. And in that silence, I understood that what had happened was no longer a misunderstanding. It was the truth, clear and undeniable. I had been living in a lie, and now it was exposed. I didn't say another word. I turned and walked away. The drive home was a blur. My mind was racing with 1,000 thoughts, but the only thing I could feel was a sickening emptiness in my stomach. The world around me seemed to move in slow motion, like I was watching it from a distance, through a fog that clouded my vision. My hands gripped the steering wheel, but I barely felt it. I didn't know where I was going, didn't know what I was supposed to do, but I knew that I couldn't go back to that apartment, to that house, to her. When I arrived at the doorstep, Lily wasn't home yet. I knew she'd come back. I knew she'd try to apologize, try to explain, but I didn't want to face her. Not yet. Not when the image of her in Evan's arms, laughing, dancing, feeling things that were never meant for me, was still burning in my mind. That night, that moment would never leave me. I stepped inside the house, the same house we'd bought together, the one we'd spent years making a home. But now it felt like a prison. The air in the living room was stale, the silence suffocating. Felt wrong, being here without her. I sat on the couch, staring at the empty space beside me, where Lily's presence used to fill the air. But now there was nothing. The silence was deafening. It was as though she had already gone, long before I ever knew. When she came home, hours later than expected, she stepped in with her usual tired smile. But there was something different in her eyes, something lost. She saw me sitting there, and the tension in the room thickened. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there watching me. The door clicked shut behind her, and for a moment we just stood in the same room, two strangers who once loved each other. "Tom," her voice was tentative, almost fragile. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. What was there left to say? Every word she had spoken in the past few weeks, every look she had given me was a lie. And now here she was, expecting me to act like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. There was no going back to the way things were. There was no pretending that the warmth between us hadn't been replaced by cold distance, by betrayal, by the painful truth of what she had done. I finally spoke, my voice barely a whisper. "Do you know what it felt like, walking into that room and seeing you with him? Do you know how it felt to realize I wasn't even a thought in your mind anymore?" Lily stepped forward, her face etched with guilt. "I didn't mean for it to look like that," she said softly. "I never wanted to hurt you, Tom. But I've been so stressed, and Evan, he's been there for me in ways you haven't. He's been helping me through everything, and I didn't realize how far things had gone until it was too late. I was just distracted." "Distracted?" I repeated, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. "You're telling me you were distracted while you were dancing with him, laughing with him, holding his hand? That's what you call being distracted? You lied to me. You lied about the trips, about the late nights, about everything. I wasn't the one you were thinking about, was I?" It was him. Her eyes welled up with tears, but I wasn't sure if they were real. I didn't know anymore. "No, Tom, it wasn't like that. I swear. I'm sorry. I never meant for you to feel like this." I stood up, my chest tight with frustration. "You've been so distant for months. You've been keeping things from me, hiding things from me. I didn't deserve this, Lily. I didn't deserve to be treated like this." She took a step toward me, reaching out to touch my arm, but I pulled away. I couldn't stand the feeling of her touch right now. "Please don't do this," she said, her voice trembling. "I know I've made mistakes, but I swear I never meant to hurt you. I was just lost." I shook my head, unable to look her in the eye. "No, you weren't lost, Lily. You just chose not to care. You chose to let me fade away, and you didn't even notice. You stopped fighting for us a long time ago." The room grew colder. The words I had been holding in for so long, words I hadn't been able to say because I was too scared of what it would mean, had finally come rushing out. And now that they were out, there was no taking them back. Lily stood there, her hands hanging at her sides, unable to speak. The silence stretched between us, a chasm that neither of us could cross. She wasn't the woman I had married anymore. She wasn't the woman who had promised to love me through everything. She had changed, and I had to accept that. It wasn't until she turned to leave that I spoke again, this time quieter, more final. "I can't do this anymore, Lily. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when it's not. We're not okay. I'm not okay." She stopped in the doorway, her hand resting on the frame, but she didn't turn around. "Tom, please, don't leave. Don't walk away from us." But it was too late. I had already walked away even if my feet hadn't moved yet. "I'm not walking away from us," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm walking away from you." The days that followed felt like a blur. Time itself seemed to slow down, the hours stretching endlessly between me and Lily. Every morning when I woke up, the house felt colder, emptier. Her side of the bed was untouched, the sheets rumpled but not as they had been when we used to fall asleep wrapped around each other. Now, I could barely stand to look at it, and the sight of her things, the little personal items she'd left behind in places she used to keep them, made my chest tighten. It felt like she had already moved out even if she was still physically there. It wasn't just the space between us that had widened, it was the silence. She'd tried to talk to me. She'd asked if we could sit down and work through things. But every time she spoke, her words felt more like apologies than actual attempts at reconciliation. And each apology just reminded me of how far we drifted. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was trying to make it all go away with empty words without really facing the reality of what she had done. I wanted to forgive her, I really did, but I couldn't. Not this time. I watched her day after day, still coming home late, still avoiding real conversation, still keeping her distance. She looked at me with those same sad eyes, like she wanted to fix things, but I couldn't let her fix something that had already broken. I had no more energy left to give her. The trust we had, once so solid, once so sure, was shattered. And in its place, there was only emptiness, only a dull ache in my chest that refused to go away. The more I tried to hold onto her, the more I felt myself slipping away. I realized in those quiet moments when she wasn't around that I had become a stranger to myself. I wasn't the man I used to be. I wasn't the husband I had promised to be. I had lost myself in trying to keep things together, trying to hold onto a marriage that wasn't even real anymore. And it hurt. It hurt in ways I couldn't explain, in ways that made me feel like I was suffocating. The idea of leaving had been on my mind for days. I had been avoiding it, telling myself that maybe things would get better, that maybe Lily would realize what she had done and try harder. But deep down, I knew it was never going to happen. She had already made her choice. And so had I. That afternoon, after another empty conversation where Lily apologized for everything, I decided I couldn't stay another day. The thought of continuing to live in the same house with her, pretending that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't, was too much to bear. I couldn't look at her anymore without feeling betrayed. I couldn't hear her apologies without knowing that they didn't mean anything. I didn't owe her another second of my time, my love, my energy. I started packing my things that evening. There wasn't much to take. Just a few clothes, a couple of books, and some things that reminded me of a life I no longer wanted to be a part of. The house felt different now, like it was no longer mine. It had always been our home, but now it was a place I needed to leave. The memories were suffocating me, and I needed to breathe again. When Lily came home that night, she looked at me in surprise, her face falling when she saw the suitcase by the door. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice shaky. She reached out to me as if trying to pull me back from the edge of the decision I had already made. "I'm leaving, Lily," I said quietly. I couldn't bring myself to look at her. "I can't do this anymore. I can't stay here and pretend like I'm okay with what's happened. I'm not okay." She stepped back, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Tom, please, don't do this. Don't leave me." But I wasn't sure she understood. She wasn't asking me to stay because she wanted me there. She was asking me to stay because she was scared of being alone. She was scared of the consequences of her actions. She didn't love me enough to stay faithful, and now she wanted me to fix everything. She wanted me to erase the hurt, the betrayal, with a smile and a promise that it would all be okay. But it wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. I've already left, I said, my voice trembling. You just don't know it yet. She broke down then, her face crumpling as if she couldn't understand how things had come to this. Tom, please don't go. I'm sorry. I swear I'm sorry. I'll fix it. I'll change. But I didn't believe her. Not anymore. It's too late for that, I said softly. I grabbed my bag, slinging it over my shoulder. I can't fix this. I can't fix us. Not when you've already made your choice. I walked out of the door, leaving the house, leaving her. The weight of it settled on my shoulders like a heavy cloak, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I breathed in deeply, feeling the air fill my lungs. It wasn't relief. It wasn't peace. But it was something. I left everything behind in that house, our life, our memories, our love. And I moved on. For the first time in so long, I moved on. I stayed with a friend in Houston for a few weeks. It was strange, adjusting to life without Lily, without the life we had built together. But it was also freeing. I was finally able to breathe again. I wasn't holding on to a relationship that wasn't real anymore. I wasn't pretending that everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. And slowly, piece by piece, I started to rebuild my life, piece by piece. I found a small place in a quiet town in Florida. It was nothing special, just a place to exist and find some peace. I started working at a bike repair shop, and although it wasn't the career I had once envisioned, it was simple. It was honest. It was enough. The first few months were hard. I missed the life I had, even though I knew it wasn't mine to keep anymore. I missed the comfort of being in a relationship, the shared moments, the love. But I realized that what I needed wasn't someone else. It wasn't a life that was built on lies. What I needed was to rebuild myself, to rediscover who I was without the shadows of betrayal hanging over me. And slowly, I did. I smiled again. I greeted the sunrise on the beach, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like the world had opened up to me again. I wasn't defined by the pain of the past. I was free. A few days after I left, Lily called. Her voice was shaky, filled with regret and a desperation that was almost painful to hear. She apologized again and again, insisting she'd made a mistake, that things had gotten out of hand, and that she hadn't realized how far she'd gone until it was too late. She begged me to come back, to try again, to give her a chance to make things right. But her words, though heartfelt, didn't reach me anymore. I'd heard the same promises too many times, and each one had been broken. I could hear the sadness in her voice, but I also heard something else, the fear of being alone, of losing the life she had. I couldn't ignore that it was no longer about us, it was about her, about what she wanted to keep. I had already walked away emotionally long before I physically left. We met in a small cafe, a neutral place where we could sit without the weight of the house, without the history. Her eyes were red, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. But I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. Tom, please, she said, I know I hurt you, but I swear I'll change. I don't want to lose you. I looked at her, but I couldn't find the person I once knew. You already lost me, Lily, I said quietly. You lost me the moment you chose someone else over us. The next few months were the hardest of my life, but also the most necessary. I kept busy, working at the bike shop, getting to know the quiet town I'd moved to, finding peace in the simplicity of my days. I woke up each morning feeling the weight of what I had left behind, but it no longer felt like a burden. It felt like freedom. I made new friends, simple people who didn't carry the weight of my past. I didn't have to explain myself to them. I wasn't defined by my old life. Slowly, I started to feel like myself again, like the man I had been before everything crumbled. I spent my weekends by the beach, letting the waves wash over me, letting go of the past, piece by piece. It wasn't easy, but it was honest. I wasn't trying to fix someone else's mistakes. I was fixing my own heart. And one morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, I realized I was no longer looking back. I was moving forward toward a future I could build for myself. I had nothing to prove, no one to impress. I had finally reclaimed my life.